Video game bosses can be really awesome, whether they're important for the story, spectacular, offer a good challenge, or throw some variety in the gameplay. When done right, they can offer some of the highlights of the game. The first boss is usually a short and easy challenge, but that doesn't mean they're not memorable. First bosses can be great at setting the tone for things to come, be the first big test of your skills, or it can serve as a clever introduction to important story elements. So, therefore, I'd like to look at 10 games that went a step further with their first big fight. The top 10 best first bosses in games. Keep in mind, this list is entirely opinion-based and these are only games I've played. Also, there are a couple of rules for this list. Only one game per franchise. It must be an actual fight where the only goal is to win. No unbeatable bosses or cutscenes. It must be the only first boss. Any game where you have the option to choose a first challenge is left out. Let's not waste any more time and start the list. Number 10. The Guardian.
What the hell?
Starting with easily the most disturbing entry on the list. A monster known as the gruesome giggling Guardian. Imagine the girl from The Ring, except she's really tall, muscular in some areas yet severely thin in others, has multiple heads, and has a giant saw blade for a hand. Pure weirdness only a J-horror action game can think of. Created by the psycho Stefano, the Guardian is a manifestation of his insanity and his disturbing obsession with creating morbid art. This monster represents the many women he murdered and used for his creations, giving this monster both an intimidating design as well as a disturbing backstory. For the first encounters, you're completely powerless against her, so the only things you can do are hide or run for your life. It's not until later when you finally have the weaponry to take her down. Even then, it's no cakewalk. Depending on the difficulty, her attacks can do massive damage and your attacks are rather weak. The most effective way to fight her is using traps in the environment in order to weaken her. A solid build-up, shocking backstory, and a fun battle. The Guardian is a great example of how to make a memorable first boss encounter. Number 9. PD Piranha. To this day, the Subspace Emissary is the most awesome single-player mode Smash Bros. Has ever had. This is a big action platform game within a fighting game, with cutscenes that feel like watching an animated Nintendo movie. Fittingly, the first boss is a familiar face from another Nintendo title. This fight also immediately offers a choice: save either Peach or Zelda, who will then accompany you for certain levels of the game. You save the character by breaking the cage they're trapped in, cleverly using the gameplay as a means to make a choice, instead of a simple A or B question. He's pretty easy, but on the very hard or intense mode, you can die in just a few hits, so being reckless will still lose you the fight. This fight got so iconic in Smash history that it even returned as Piranha Plant's final Smash in Ultimate. Number 8. Dracula. In unique fashion, Symphony of the Night starts the game with the final battle of the last game, heavily decreased in difficulty, of course, so you can be able to beat him regardless of how skillful you play. But it is a perfect way to start off the events of the game, giving the importance this battle has to the story of Symphony of the Night. Even though Dracula was defeated, his castle shows up again shortly afterwards. It's hinted that Richter, who originally defeated Dracula, was the one behind his resurrection. Why would Richter do that? Wasn't the entire purpose of the fight to take Dracula down and keep him down? Immediately, you have a gripping mystery that gives you a good reason to explore the castle. This mystery wouldn't be as impactful if it was just a scrolling text reminding you of what happened, instead of experience that final crucial moment again through gameplay. Not much else to say. It's a way easier version of a famous boss battle, but for good narrative reasons. Number 7. Bowser. This may not qualify as a boss battle for today's standards, but this moment is an important staple in video game history that deserves to be mentioned. At the time, most games were more about high scores. While there were already games that tried to have more of a narrative, this was one of the first big titles that introduced the idea of a main villain that you need to defeat multiple times in order to reach a clear goal. Starting simple with only a fire projectile to dodge, the fights got notably harder the next time you would encounter him. ending with an overwhelming amount of projectiles where it was really hard to find an opening. Sure, you can beat him by just running underneath him, or if you have a mushroom equipped, you can just run through him. But it was one of the first times, if not the very first time, they made an enemy harder each time you fought him, introducing the idea of multiple phases. This iconic encounter laid the foundation of what became important stables of boss battles, and it even made multiple returns in modern Mario titles. For its sheer impact and a place in video game history, Bowser is one of the most memorable first boss-like encounters in gaming. Number 6. The Guerrilla Boss. In Astro Bot, you are a big character hovering over small worlds with small characters in VR. It feels like everything that you see is really in front of you, like you can just pick up anything you see with your bare hands. This makes it all the more awesome that for your first boss fight, suddenly a giant monster appears and towers over you. All the bosses in this game are a lot of fun, but it was the first unexpected appearance of a giant that created one of the biggest what the fuck moments I have ever experienced in VR. The fight itself is very fun to do also. You have to defeat this boss by pulling out his teeth. Even though it's a robot, I could still feel the sheer weight and impact of every pull. A fantastic first fight in a lineup of awesome bosses. Number 5. Asylum Demon. Pretty much all From Software's first bosses show up in other people's lists, because they have a reputation of throwing you into the fire straight away. Dark Souls is the only one that I've put some serious hours into, so it's the only From Software title you'll be seeing on this list. But while I'm on the subject, I've got to tell you a secret. I suck at Dark Souls. You don't know how many times I had to redo that bridge monster before I won. Spawning at that bonfire is giving me PTSD till this day. But even with that in mind, I still consider the Asylum Demon to be one of the best first bosses. Why? Because, like the rest of this game, he can be tough but in a fair way. A perfect introduction to the world of Dark Souls, as well as you'll learn that using the environment against the opponent might be an essential part to win the fight. I'm looking at you, hidden ladder at the bridge boss. I also love the creative design of all the monsters in Dark Souls. They're gruesome, intimidating, weird. It's definitely a game world that made me curious as to what all these beings are and what exactly is going on. Maybe I'll give it another shot someday. Number 4. Darkside. A boss where I've had a hard time pinpointing just why it's so memorable. He isn't hard, maybe a little on critical mode, but that's it. He doesn't have a significant role in the story or is even that creative of a fight in comparison to most in the game. Yet he makes a lasting impression. Darkside shows up in the tutorial of the game and he perfectly sets the tone as to what to expect from the enemies. His design is definitely a lot more intimidating due to his giant size and slow movement. From the moment he shows up, you know there's something important about him. Throughout the series, Darkside keeps returning for fights. When multiple of them show up in a cutscene, it symbolizes how the heroes are overwhelmed and all hope is lost. Darkside became some sort of staple of the Kingdom Hearts series, the face of Strong Heartless, and it's often the first enemy I think about when I think about Kingdom Hearts bosses. A fight that through context and repeated appearances became an iconic face of one of my personal favorite franchises. Number 3. Tsugaru Kamoshida. In Persona 5, there is an alternative reality where the evil of a person's heart gets a physical representation, which is called a castle. One that symbolizes the deeds, desires, and feelings of the evildoer. You can make this person have a change of heart by invading their castle and stealing their treasure. The first castle the heroes invade is from the school's gym teacher. While he looks like a harmless dude upon first meeting him, you'll soon find out he's a power-hungry monster that mentally, physically, and probably sexually abuses his students. He pushes them beyond their limits and takes all the profits from their achievements, often completely breaking them in the progress. When one of his students attempts suicide, the heroes can't take it anymore and decide to put a stop to his abuse once and for all. But of course, he won't let you get to his treasure that easy. When you're near his treasure, he turns into a giant monster that represents who he really is.
What the hell?
They went all out in applying his traits to both this weird design and his attacks. Out of all the bosses on this list, this one definitely has the most story to him. You learn to hate this guy so much throughout the first hours of this game by witnessing the pain and trauma he causes to all his students. I wanted to win this fight with a burning desire, making it one of the most satisfying first bosses to beat, and most memorable first bosses in general. Number 2. Valis. You encounter Valis very soon in the game, after you just learn to climb. Fittingly, all you need to do to beat this boss is climb him, but if you have no idea what to do, this can be somewhat tricky. You can hang on to his hair and stand on his armor, but you still need to reach his weak points. Meanwhile, he will heavily shake as an attempt to get you off of him, or your stamina might run out and you'll fall off. All these elements make him a puzzle-like climb that's very satisfying to beat. All Colossuses after him expand on the technique that you used to beat him, either by making the climbable areas hard to get to, placing armor over their weak spot, or by making the Colossus themselves very hard to reach due to the fact that they hide underwater or fly in the sky. It's also the first time the game introduces the morally gray tone of the story. Valis is just roaming around the land, minding his own business and meaning no harm, but you attack him anyway in order to save someone who only the main character seems to really know. Are you the hero defeating evil monsters and saving a good person? Or are you the bad guy killing innocent creatures in order to selfishly save a nobody? Beating him is very satisfying in terms of gameplay, but in terms of story, it's presented in a way that feels more tragic than victorious. Valis seems to hit every right note of a first boss, making him one of the best first bosses in gaming. And the best first boss in gaming is...
I warned you.
Finally.
You would not listen.
Every God of War game has an awesome first battle, but personally, I was growing a bit tired of all the giant monsters you slay by attacking their heads and feet throughout the series. Having a fight against a regular-sized warrior was a welcome change of pace for a first encounter. Everything about this fight and the overall story around it works exceptionally well. Kratos is the retired warrior who has a new life, while his old life is a secret to those close to him. After playing a bit of the game, learning how his everyday life is, suddenly a stranger arrives who claims to know about Kratos' past. Immediately there is tension. Who is this stranger? How does he know this? It appears to be some weak dude until...
Fine. My turn.
What follows is one of the most epic mano-a-mano ever to be put into a game. You just feel the sheer impact of every single punch these gods throw at each other, slamming each other through trees or punching skulls against rocks. Despite the fact that Kratos fought many giant monsters in the past, this smaller stranger seems to hold his ground just fine against him, making you feel powerless. All of this plays an essential role in the story. The stranger turns out to be Baldur, the son of Odin, who can't die. His mother put a spell on him so that he wouldn't feel pain. Unbeknownst to her, this spell made him incapable of feeling anything. This well-intended spell became a curse that ruined his life, setting up an engaging backstory that eventually crosses paths with Kratos's. This encounter also sets up a rivalry between Kratos and Baldur's family. Magni, Modi, and Frigg are characters you meet in this game, but they also strongly hint at an encounter with Odin and Thor to look forward to. Kratos is put into a position where encounters with multiple Norse gods, who want him dead, is inevitable, all starting with this visit from Baldur that turns into an epic fistfight. Did you enjoy the video? Why not consider a like and a sub? And thanks for watching!